I used to believe the coldest moment of my life was the day my husband left without a word. I was wrong. The true freeze hit me in a supermarket parking lot, holding a dead phone while my daughter studied by the dashboard light. My father's voice cut through the receiver, telling me that we were not family. He had no idea that his rejection just started a war that would end at his perfect daughter's birthday party. My name is Vivian Ortiz, and I am 37 years old. If you had met me 2 years ago, I would have handed you a business card from Larkwell Studio Collective on heavy cream-colored cardstock that felt expensive between your fingers. I would have bought the first round of drinks without checking my banking app. I would have talked about kitchen renovations and summer camps, and the exhausting but rewarding nature of managing high-stakes design projects. I was a person who existed on paper. I had a credit score. I had an address. I had a life that fit neatly into the checkboxes of the American dream. Now, I am a ghost haunting the parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket on the outskirts of Milwaukee. The distinction between being a citizen and being a nuisance is thinner than people think. It is exactly the thickness of a car window. When the window is up, you are just a traveler resting. When the window is down and you are running an extension cord to the outlet behind a vending machine because your car battery is dying and you need to charge a phone to find a shelter that isn't full, you become something else. You become a problem. It was a Tuesday night in late February. The weather in Wisconsin during this time of year is not just cold, it is malicious. The snow had stopped falling days ago, but it had not melted. It had simply turned into a gray, frozen slush that coated everything in a layer of grime. The air inside our sedan was heavy with the smell of wet wool and the distinct, metallic scent of anxiety. The heater only worked if we were driving, and since we were preserving gas, the car was slowly becoming a refrigerator. I watched my breath bloom against the windshield, obscuring the neon sign of the supermarket. Beside me in the passenger seat, Maya was hunched over. She is 16 going on 40. Most teenagers are worrying about prom dates or pimples. My daughter was worrying about thermal dynamics and whether or not we would have enough money for a hot breakfast. The blue light of her phone illuminated her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She was studying for her college entrance exams. She had downloaded the practice tests while we were parked outside a library earlier that afternoon. She was wearing 3 layers of sweaters, and her fingers were wrapped in fingerless gloves that she had bought from a thrift store bin for $2. "Mom," she whispered, not looking up from the small screen. "Do you think the car battery is holding?" "It's fine," I lied. I checked the percentage on my own phone, which was plugged into the long orange cord snake trailing out the window to the outlet near the red box machine. 12%. Enough for one crucial conversation. Maya shifted, trying to get comfortable. The back seat was filled with plastic bags containing our clothes, a cooler, and a box of non-perishable food. The front seat was the only place to sit upright. She had worked a 4-hour shift at a bakery after school today, standing on concrete floors, smiling at customers who bought pastries that cost more than our daily food budget. She had handed me her tips $26 without a word when she got in the car. I had taken it. That is the specific kind of hell that burns the hottest taking cash from your child's hand so you can put 3 gallons of fuel in the tank to keep them from freezing. "I have to make the call," I said. It was a statement to myself more than to her. Maya stopped scrolling. She didn't look at me, but her shoulders went rigid. "You don't have to. We can figure it out. I get paid again on Friday. We can't sleep here again. Maya, the security guard has circled twice. The next time, he calls the cops, and it is going to be 5 degrees tonight." She didn't argue. She knew the math as well as I did. We were out of options. We had exhausted the patience of the few friends who had spare couches. We had exhausted my credit limits. We had exhausted the illusion that this was just a temporary setback. I unplugged my phone and rolled up the window, cutting off the lifeline to the vending machine. The car instantly felt smaller. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Dad. It felt like a foreign word. Franklin Hale. My thumb hovered over the call button. I rehearsed the script in my head. I needed to be calm. I needed to be rational. Franklin respected logic. He despised emotion. If I cried, he would hang up. If I begged too hard, he would see it as weakness. I had to pitch this like a business proposal: low impact, high necessity, clear exit strategy. I pressed the button. The ringback tone was loud in the silent car. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. I was praying for voicemail because it is easier to beg a machine. But I was also praying for an answer because a machine cannot unlock a front door. Hello? His voice was clear, crisp, lacking the static that seemed to overlay the rest of my life. He sounded warm, likely sitting in his study with the mahogany shelves and the gas fireplace that turned on with a switch. "Dad," I said. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing the trembling out of my tone. "Dad, it's Vivian." There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted long enough to make my stomach turn over. "Vivian, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Is everything all right?" He knew it wasn't. He had to know. But this was the game, actually. "No," I said, looking out at the bleak, gray parking lot. "I'm in a bit of a tight spot." "Dad, a transition period." "Transition," he repeated. The words sounded dry in his mouth. "I need a favor. A big one, but a short one." I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand, squeezing it until my knuckles turned white. "I need a place to stay. Just for 2 weeks, 14 days, just until I get my first check from this new freelance contract and can put a deposit down on an apartment." There was no new freelance contract. There was only the hope of one, a maybe from a recruiter who hadn't emailed me back in 3 days. But I couldn't tell him that. "Vivian," he sighed. It was the sigh of a man burdened by the incompetence of others. "You know how things are right now." "I do," I said quickly, cutting off his objection before it could fully form. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. It's not just me. It's Maya. She's studying for her SATs. Dad, she's trying to get into university. She needs a desk. She needs a bed. She can't function like this." I glanced at Maya. She was staring out the side window, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. She was pretending not to listen, but I knew she was holding her breath. "We have the space," I pressed. "The house has 5 bedrooms. We wouldn't be in the way. We'd stay in the guest wing. You wouldn't even know we were there. We buy our own food. We handle our own laundry. Just a roof." "Dad, that is all I'm asking for." Silence again. I could hear the faint sound of classical music in the background on his end. Vivaldi. Maybe. It sounded like another world. "It's not about the space. Vivian," he said finally. His voice had shifted. It was no longer the voice of a father. It was the voice of a landlord denying an application. "It's Marla. She's sensitive to disruptions right now. Having house guests would make her uncomfortable." Marla, his wife, my stepmother, though she was only 7 years older than me. Marla, who had never worked a day in her life, who found my very existence to be a stain on her perfectly curated suburban life. Disruptions, I asked. The desperation leaking into my voice, ruining my carefully planned pitch. "Dad, we are talking about your granddaughter sleeping in a Toyota Camry. It's 10 degrees outside. We aren't house guests. We are your family." And then he said it. He said it with such casual cruelty, with such matter-of-fact calmness, that it took a moment for the words to actually register in my brain. "You're not family." "Vivian." The world stopped. The hum of the parking lot lights, the distant sound of traffic, the beating of my own heart, it all ceased. "Excuse me," I whispered. "You chose your path," he said, his voice steady. "You chose that husband of yours. You chose to leave this house and live your own life. When things fall apart, you can't just come running back and expect me to fix your mistakes. Marla and I have our own family unit. We have our own peace. You are an adult. Vivian, you are outside of this circle." I felt a physical sensation of being erased. It wasn't just a rejection of shelter. It was a retroactive deletion of my history. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I had looked up to him, he was stripping it all away. He was holding the deed to my identity. and he was ripping it in half. "I am your daughter," I said, my voice trembling uncontrollably now. "Maya is your blood. Maya is a sweet girl," he said, but the tone suggested otherwise. "But I heard she's working at some grocery store or bakery now, doing manual labor. She's helping us survive." I snapped. "It's embarrassing." "Vivian," he said, "a hail does not wipe tables. A hail does not bag groceries. It reflects poorly on us. If you had raised her with better standards, maybe she wouldn't be in this position. It's menial. It's beneath us." He was ashamed. He wasn't worried about her safety. He was worried that one of his golf buddies might see his granddaughter wearing an apron and serving coffee. I looked at Maya. She had turned her head. She was looking right at me. Her eyes were wide, dry, and terrifyingly clear. She had heard. The car was silent. The phone volume was high enough. She had heard her grandfather call her work the work that put gas in this car. The work that fed us when I couldn't. Embarrassing. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my chest. It replaced the cold. It replaced the fear. "You listen to me," I started, but he cut me off. "I have to go. Vivian, Marla is waiting for dinner. Good luck with your situation. Don't call the house line again. It upsets her." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone, unable to move. I felt like I had been gutted. I had humiliated myself, stripped away my last layer of pride, and he had stepped on it without breaking his stride. I slowly lowered the phone. I couldn't look at Maya. I couldn't bear to see the realization hitting her, the realization that the safety net she thought existed, the grandfather she thought loved her, was a myth. "He didn't mean it," I said automatically, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes, he did," Maya said. Her voice was steady, too steady. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the dashboard, her hands clenched in her lap. "He meant every word. Mom, we aren't family to him. We're just trash he doesn't want on his driveway." I wanted to hug her, but I knew if I touched her, we would both shatter. So I just stared out into the dark. Snowy night. The hopelessness was a physical weight, pressing down on the roof of the car. We had nowhere to go, no money, no family. But then, a strange, jagged memory surfaced in the silence. It was a fragment of a conversation from 20 years ago. I was 17, sitting in the kitchen of that massive 5-bedroom house. Franklin had been arguing with his mother, my grandma Eleanor. They were arguing about the deed, about the trust. I remembered the look on his face back then. It wasn't the arrogant, dismissive look he had now. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear. He had been terrified of her, and just now, when I had pushed him, when I had mentioned the house, there had been a flicker in his voice before the anger took over. A hesitation. Why was he so defensive about the house? Why did he say Marla is uncomfortable instead of, "It's my house"? "Mom?" Maya asked, breaking my trance. "What are we going to do?" I looked at my phone. 11% battery. I looked at the house in my memory. The house Franklin claimed was his fortress. And I remembered something else. Grandma Eleanor wasn't dead. She was in an assisted living facility 2 towns over. Franklin had told me years ago that she was senile, that she didn't know who anyone was anymore. So there was no point in visiting. He had isolated her just like he had isolated me. But what if he was lying? "We're going to figure it out," I said, and for the first time that night, my voice had a hard edge to it. I wasn't just a desperate mother anymore. I was a woman who had just realized that the man who locked the gate might not actually own the keys. "What about Grandpa?" Maya asked, her voice small. "Grandpa made a mistake," I said, starting the engine. The car sputtered and then roared to life, the vibration shaking the seats. "He thinks he can decide who is family and who isn't, but he forgot one thing." What he forgot? That Grandma Eleanor is still alive. I put the car in reverse. The tires crunched over the frozen slush. We weren't going to a shelter, not yet. I had one more lead to follow, and it lay in the silence Franklin tried to enforce when I mentioned his mother. He had told me I wasn't family. Fine, I would accept that. But I was going to make sure he found out exactly what happens when you turn your back on your own blood, and I was going to start by pulling the loose thread he was so desperate to hide. Get the map up. Maya, I said, driving out of the parking lot and into the bitter Wisconsin night. We have work to do. To understand why a 37-year-old woman ends up sleeping in a sedan in a Wisconsin winter, you have to rewind the tape. You have to go back to a time when the heating bill was on autopay and the refrigerator was full of organic produce that I bought without looking at the price tags. 2 years ago, I was not a homeless woman. I was a senior project manager at Larkwell Studio Collective. I had a corner desk with a view of the skyline, a retirement account that was growing by 6% annually, and a calendar color-coded by the quarter hour. I was the woman who fixed things. When a client panicked because the supply chain delayed their marble imports, I was the one who found a local quarry and negotiated a discount before lunch. I was competent, I was stable, I was safe. Or so I thought. The erosion of my life did not happen all at once like a bomb going off. It happened slowly, like water leaking behind a wall, rotting the support beams while the paint on the outside still looked fresh. It started with Peter. Peter Walters was my husband of 12 years. He was the man who used to leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror telling me I looked beautiful in my sleep. He was the father who never missed Maya's soccer games. But then, the atmosphere in our house shifted. It was subtle at first. He started turning his phone face down on the coffee table. When a text message came in, he would not check it immediately. He would wait until I went to the kitchen or the bathroom. He started coming home late. 7 in the evening turned into 9, and 9 turned into 11. He blamed the workload. He said the firm was downsizing, and he had to prove his value. He looked me in the eye, his face drawn and tired, and told me he was doing it for us. He said he was stressed. He said he was building our future. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We were a team. We shared a mortgage. We shared a child. We shared a tax return. But while I was managing projects at Larkwell, Peter was managing an exit strategy. The betrayal was not just about another woman, though I suspect there was one. Infidelity is painful, but it is emotional. What Peter did to me was structural. It was administrative violence. It began on a Thursday. I was at the grocery store, buying ingredients for a lasagna. I swiped our joint debit card. The machine beeped a harsh, low tone. Declined. I assumed it was a chip error. I swiped again. Declined. I felt that prickle of heat on the back of my neck that happens when a line of people is waiting behind you. I pulled out my personal credit card, the one we kept for emergencies and travel points. Declined. I paid with the $40 cash I had in my wallet and left the cart full of groceries behind. I sat in my car in the parking lot, a different parking lot, a different car. Back when I still had leather seats and opened the banking app on my phone, I expected to see a fraud alert. I expected to see that someone in Florida had stolen our numbers to buy televisions. Instead, I saw 0. Actually, it was worse than 0. The checking account was overdrawn by $400. The savings account, which held our emergency fund and the start of Maya's college tuition, was empty. It had been drained in a series of transfers over the last 3 weeks. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to comprehend the numbers. My brain tried to reject the data. It had to be a glitch. Banks made mistakes. I called Peter, straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Call me. Emergency. The bank accounts are empty." He did not reply. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. His closet was not empty. His clothes were still there. His toothbrush was still in the holder. But his laptop was gone. His passport was gone from the lockbox in the study. And then I checked the mail. There was a letter from a credit card company I did not recognize. It was addressed to both of us. I opened it. My hands shaking so badly I ripped the envelope in half. It was a statement for a card with a $20,000 limit. The balance was $19,800. I had never applied for this card. I ran to my computer and pulled my credit report. That was the moment the floor actually fell out from under me. In the last 6 months, Peter had opened 5 credit cards in our joint names. He had taken out a personal line of credit secured against our car. He had maximized every single penny of leverage our combined credit scores could buy. He hadn't just stolen the cash we had, he had stolen the money we didn't have. He had turned our marriage license into a weapon of mass financial destruction. The American financial system is designed to be a trap for the uninitiated. I learned this the hard way. Because we were married, and because he had access to my social security number and personal information as my husband. The debt was legally mine as much as it was his. The banks did not care that I didn't know. They did not care that he had forged my digital signature or clicked I agree on a term sheet while I was sleeping. They only cared that my name was on the contract. For the next week, I lived in a state of high-functioning panic. I tried to find him. I called his office. The receptionist told me, with a confused tone, that Peter had resigned 2 weeks ago. He had cashed out his vacation days. Then came the email. It arrived at 3 a.m. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was 3 sentences long. Vivian, I can't do this anymore. The pressure is too much and I need to start over. Don't look for me. That was it. 12 years of marriage, a daughter, a life built brick by brick. Dismantled in 3 sentences sent from a secure server that gave no location data. I tried to hire a lawyer. I sat in a plush office with a man who smelled like expensive cologne and leather. He looked at my financial statements and shook his head. He told me that a forensic accounting investigation to trace the hidden assets would cost $10,000 up front. He told me that fighting the credit card companies to prove fraud when the perpetrator was a spouse was historically difficult and expensive. I didn't have $10,000. I didn't have $10, so I became my own lawyer. I spent my nights reading PDFs of family law and debt collection statutes. I learned about community property states versus common law property states. I learned that my credit score, which had plummeted from 750 to 520 in a month, was now a shackle. Landlords check credit scores. Employers check credit scores. Car insurance companies check credit scores. Peter hadn't just left me broke. He had made me radioactive. The hardest part was keeping the sky from falling on Maya. She was 14 then. She was perceptive. She knew something was wrong. But I refused to let her carry the weight of it. I became an actress in my own home. I woke up 20 minutes early to put on makeup so I wouldn't look like I hadn't slept. I drove her to school and talked about her history project with upbeat enthusiasm, while mentally calculating if I had enough gas to get to work and back. I stopped buying meat. I started making elaborate vegetable stews, telling Maya we were trying a clean eating challenge. I canceled the cable and told her we were doing a digital detox to focus on reading. I sold my jewelry, piece by piece, to pawn shops 2 towns over so no one we knew would see me. I sold the designer handbags I had bought as rewards for my promotions. Every transaction was a small death. I sat at the kitchen island late at night, the glow of the laptop screen the only light in the house, watching the forensic trail of my husband's theft. It wasn't one big withdrawal. It was death by 1,000 cuts. $50 at a gas station, $200 at a liquor store, $1,000 transfer to a PayPal account, $300 for an Airbnb in the city. It was humiliating. I was watching my husband live a secret life in real-time transaction data. I saw the dinners he bought for someone else. I saw the hotel rooms. I saw the movie tickets. But amidst the chaos of charges, the grocery runs, the gas, the cash withdrawals, there was a pattern I couldn't quite figure out. Every month, on the 15th, there was a transfer. It wasn't huge. Sometimes it was $500. Sometimes it was $850. It was always an odd amount, never a round number, which made it look like a bill payment or an invoice. The recipient was listed simply as Consulting SVCS in the bank statement preview. Most people would have missed it. It looked like a utility bill or a medical copay. But I was a project manager. My entire career was built on noticing when a budget line item didn't match the ledger. I clicked on the transaction details for one of the transfers from 3 months before Peter left. I expanded the metadata. Reference V. Tyrell Finn. Group. I had never heard of V. Tyrell Financial Group. Peter worked in logistics sales. He didn't hire financial consultants. And if he did, Why was he paying them from our personal checking account in random increments? I searched the name on the internet. Nothing. No website. No LinkedIn profile. It was a ghost company. I dug deeper. I went back 6 months. The transfers were there. I went back a year. There they were. He had been siphoning money to this entity for 18 months before he left. It wasn't just a sudden break. It was a long-term extraction. One night, exhausted and running on caffeine and rage, I finally found a trace. I searched the business registry database for the state. It took me 3 hours of cross-referencing, but I found a filing for a V, Tyrell Solutions, that had been dissolved and reformed under a different LLC shell. The registered agent for the company was a lawyer based in Chicago, but the mailing address for the billing department, the address where the invoices were generated, was a P.O. box in a small town called Oconomowoc. I stared at that city name, Oconomowoc. It was a wealthy suburb about 40 minutes west of Milwaukee. It was golf course country. It was old money and lake houses. It didn't make sense. Peter had no clients in Oconomowoc. We didn't know anyone in Oconomowoc. I wrote the address down on the back of an envelope. I stared at the transaction code again. V. Tyrell. I felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the drafty house. It felt like I was looking at the corner of a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture I thought I was building. Peter was a selfish coward who wanted a new life. Yes, but this felt organized. This felt professional. Why was my husband sending thousands of dollars to a P.O. box in a town he never visited? I closed the laptop. I didn't have the energy to solve a mystery. I was too busy trying to figure out how to pay the electricity bill so the lights wouldn't get cut off while Maya was doing her homework. I filed the information away in the back of my mind, buried under the immediate panic of survival. I told myself it was probably just a way he laundered the money to his mistress. I told myself it didn't matter because the money was gone and he was gone. At the time, I didn't know that company name would lead straight back to my father's house. If the financial ruin was a slow leak, my mother's illness was a sudden, violent storm that tore the roof off the shelter I was trying to build. Elena Ortiz was a woman made of iron and orchid petals. She raised me on a single income, working double shifts at a department store cosmetics counter, teaching me that dignity was not something you bought, but something you carried in your spine. When she got sick, she tried to hide it. She wore scarves to cover the swelling in her neck. She attributed her fatigue to the changing season. By the time the doctors gave us a name for the thing eating her alive, it was already stage 4. The American healthcare system is a machine designed to extract every cent of hope you have left. My mother had insurance, but it was the kind of insurance that looked good on paper and vanished when you actually needed to use it. There were deductibles. There were out-of-network specialists. There were co-pays for medications that cost more than my monthly car payment. I was already bleeding out from the wounds Peter had left in my bank account. Now, I was facing a tsunami of medical bills. I remember standing in the sterile hallway of St. Jude's Hospital on a Tuesday afternoon. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sound that drilled into my temples. I had just spoken to the billing department. They needed a deposit of $5,000 to transfer my mother to the palliative care unit she needed. If I didn't pay, she would be discharged to a state facility that smelled of bleach and neglect. I had $40 in my purse. I walked to the vending machines at the end of the hall. Not to buy anything, but to find a corner where no one could see me shake. I pulled out my phone. I had sworn I wouldn't do it. I had sworn I would figure this out on my own. But looking at my mother's pale, frightened face in that hospital bed had broken my pride. I called my father. Franklin answered on the second ring. He sounded brisk, businesslike, as if he were closing a deal rather than talking to his daughter. "Vivian," he said, "I have a tea time in 20 minutes. Make it quick." "It's Mom," I said. My voice felt thick. "She's dying. Dad, the cancer has spread to her lymphatic system. The doctors say it is a matter of weeks, maybe a month." There was a pause on the line. I waited for a gasp, a soften in his tone, a question about how she was feeling. Elena had been his wife for 10 years. She was the woman who had ironed his shirts when he was a nobody junior associate. She was the mother of his first child. "I am sorry to hear that," Franklin said. His tone was flat, the way one expresses condolences for a distant acquaintance's failed business venture. "Is that why you are calling?" "I need help, Dad," I said, leaning my forehead against the cool glass of the vending machine. "The insurance won't cover the hospice care. They want $5,000 up front. I don't have it. Peter took everything. I just need to make sure she isn't in pain. I need to make sure she is safe." "Vivian," he sighed, the sound sharp with irritation. "We have been divorced for nearly 30 years. Whatever obligations I had to Elena ended when the judge signed the decree. I paid my child support. I did my part. This isn't about legal obligation," I pleaded. "It is about human decency. She is the mother of your daughter. She is dying. And whose fault is it that you cannot provide for her?" He shot back. The sudden aggression in his voice made me flinch. "You had a good job, Vivian. You had a husband. You let him walk all over you. You let him rob you blind because you were too busy playing house to pay attention to the finances. Why should I drain my resources to fix your mismanagement?" "I didn't let him. You always make things messy," he interrupted. "You always have some drama. First the divorce, now this. It is exhausting." Then, I heard a click on the line. Someone had picked up an extension. "Franklin, is that her again?" It was Marla. Her voice was like silk wrapped around a razor blade. "She wants money for Elena," Franklin said, his tone shifting instantly from aggression to a conspiratorial weariness. "Oh, Vivian," Marla said. I could picture her perfectly, standing in their granite kitchen, sipping sparkling water with a slice of lime. "I am truly sorry about your mother, but you have to understand our position. We have our own expenses. We have Brielle's tuition. We have the summer house maintenance. We can't just throw money into a black hole every time you hit a bump in the road." "A bump in the road," I choked out. "She is dying. Marla." "It is a tragedy," Marla agreed smoothly. "But it is also a lesson, isn't it? This is what happens when you don't plan. This is what happens when you choose men like Peter. You really have shown a lack of judgment your entire adult life, dear. If you had just focused more on stability and less on whatever it is you do, you wouldn't be begging your father for handouts at his age. It is unbecoming." The cruelty was breathtaking. It was so polite, so structured, that it took a moment to realize she had just called my mother's death an inconvenience and my life a failure in the same breath. "I am not asking for a handout," I said, my voice rising. "I will pay you back, every cent." "Like you paid back the student loans?" Franklin asked. "No, Vivian, the answer is no. We are not a bank. Figure it out." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time. The vending machine hummed. A nurse walked by, pushing a cart of medication. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't just the refusal. It was the rewriting of history. They had turned my mother's suffering into a commentary on my character. I went back to the room. I signed the papers for a payment plan I knew I couldn't afford. I sold my car, the one with the leather seats, the next day to a dealership that gave me 60% of its value because they smelled desperation. I bought a beat-up sedan with the difference and used the rest to pay the hospice deposit. The next 3 weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless pressure. I lived in the hospital chair. I watched my mother shrink. I watched the light fade from her eyes. And while I held her hand, my phone in my pocket vibrated constantly. It was a rhythm of harassment. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a known number. A debt collector looking for Peter, threatening to garnish wages I wasn't even earning because I had taken unpaid leave. At 2 in the afternoon, the school nurse. Maya had fallen asleep in history class again. Maya hadn't turned in her permission slip for the field trip. Maya looked thin. At 4 o'clock, the hospital billing coordinator. "Ms. Ortiz, the insurance rejected the claim for the morphine drip. We need to discuss an alternative payment method." I felt like I was being hunted. I was fighting a war on 2 fronts, trying to ease my mother's passage out of this world, while the world tried to crush me for staying in it. Elena passed away on a Thursday morning. It was raining a cold, miserable Wisconsin rain that turned the world gray. She woke up briefly, looked at me with eyes that seemed to see something far away, squeezed my hand, and then simply stopped breathing. There was no cinematic final speech. There was no revelation, just silence. The funeral was small. It had to be. I couldn't afford a plot in the nice cemetery, so we buried her in a municipal lot near the highway. The noise of trucks thundering past interrupted the priest's prayers. There were maybe 10 people there, my mother's old coworkers, a few neighbors. Maya stood next to me, wearing a black dress that was slightly too short for her because she had grown 3 inches in the last year and I hadn't noticed. She didn't cry. She stood like a soldier, her jaw set, holding an umbrella over my head. I had texted Franklin the time and location. I didn't expect money anymore. I just expected him to show up, to pay respects to the woman he had shared a decade of his life with. He wasn't there. When the service ended and the few mourners drifted away to their cars, I checked my phone. There was a text from him. Cannot make it. Brielle has her regional flute competition today. Big event for her. Send my regards. A flute competition. He missed the funeral of his ex-wife to watch his other daughter play a woodwind instrument in a high school gymnasium. That was the moment the realization truly hit me. It wasn't that Franklin was busy. It wasn't that he was forgetful. It was that he was actively curating his reality. In his mind, the Hale family consisted of him, Marla, and Brielle. Anything outside of that frame, Elena, me, Maya was static. We were glitches in the broadcast. He wasn't just neglecting us. He was deleting us. We drove home in silence. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a hypnotic rhythm against the rain. He didn't come, Maya said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. He had a conflict. He went to Brielle's thing, she said. She knew. Of course she knew. She followed Brielle on social media. She had probably seen the check-in. Maya turned in her seat to look at me. Her face was pale in the passing streetlights. Mom, she said quietly, does Grandpa hate me because I have your last name? The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I almost swerved the car. What? No, Maya. Of course not. He calls Brielle Miss Hale, Maya continued, her voice devoid of emotion, analyzing the data like a scientist. I heard him once. He talks about the Hale legacy. But I am an Ortiz, like Grandma, like you now. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. Maya, your grandfather is a complicated man. He has specific ideas about how things should look. It is not about you. It is about him. It feels like it is about me, she whispered. It feels like we are the wrong brand. I didn't have an answer for her. How do you tell your child that she is right? That to her grandfather. She is a depreciation of the asset, not an heir. We pulled into the driveway of the rental house we were about to be evicted from. I turned off the engine. The rain hammered on the roof. I felt a level of exhaustion that went down to my marrow. I was an orphan now. My mother was in the ground. My father was a stranger. My husband was a thief, and my daughter was beginning to understand that the world did not love her back. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I looked down, expecting another debt collector, another threat, another bill. But the screen lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize. The area code was local, but not one I had saved. I picked it up and swiped the screen. The message was short. Don't talk about this over the phone. They are watching. I frowned, staring at the words. Talk about what? Who is watching? My heart gave a strange, erratic thump. I thought about the transaction codes on Peter's bank statement. I thought about the consulting firm. I thought about the fear in Franklin's voice when I had mentioned Grandma Eleanor in the past. I looked out the window into the dark. Rainy street. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down. It was just a car. It was probably a neighbor. But for the first time, the darkness didn't just feel empty. It felt occupied. Mom? Maya asked, opening her door. You coming? Yeah, I said, sliding the phone into my pocket, the screen still glowing against my hip. I'm coming. I didn't tell her about the message. I didn't tell her that for a split second, the grief had been replaced by something sharper, something colder. I walked into the dark house, and I locked the door behind me, wondering if the lock was there to keep people out, or if it was already too late. If you have never lost your footing in the American middle class, you might believe that hitting rock bottom is a sudden, loud event. You imagine a crash, but it is not a crash. It is a slide. It is a long, quiet, humiliating slide down a slope made of unanswered emails and declined transactions, where you claw at roots that pull loose in your hands. 3 weeks after my mother's funeral, I walked into the Larkwell Studio Collective offices, ready to bury my grief in spreadsheets. I needed the distraction. More importantly, I needed the paycheck. I had emptied the last of my liquidity to put my mother in the ground, and I was counting on my quarterly performance bonus to restart the engine of my life. I arrived at 8 in the morning. By 9, the company server was down. By 10, we were called into an all-hands meeting in the glass-walled conference room. Marcus Larkwell, a man who wore $400 sneakers and preached about corporate synergy, stood at the head of the table. He did not look at us. He looked at a spot on the wall behind our heads. Due to unforeseen market contractions and a liquidity crisis regarding our primary investors, he said, using words that were designed to sanitize disaster. Larkwell Studio Collective is ceasing operations effective immediately. We filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this morning. The room went silent. It was a vacuum of sound. What about payroll? Someone asked. We get paid on Friday. Payroll is frozen, Marcus said, finally looking at his shoes. All assets are now under the control of the trustee. You will have to file a claim as a creditor. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't hear the rest of the meeting. I only heard the math screaming in my head. I was owed $4,000 in back pay and a $6,000 bonus. That money was already spent in my mind. It was earmarked for rent, for the credit card minimums, for food. I walked out of that building with a cardboard box containing a stapler, a photo of Maya, and a potted succulent. I was 37 years old. I was a senior project manager with 15 years of experience, and I was now unemployed, broke, and carrying a debt load that was radioactive. The system tells you that there is a safety net. It is called unemployment insurance. I applied that afternoon. I spent 4 hours navigating a state website that was coded in the late 90s, filling out forms, uploading my severance letter, and certifying that I was able and available to work. The screen flashed green application received. Estimated determination, 7 to 10 days. 7 days passed, then 14, then 21, every time I logged in. The status remained the same pending adjudication. I called the hotline. I sat on hold for 3 hours and 12 minutes, listening to a looped saxophone track that sounded like it was being played underwater. When a human finally answered, she sounded exhausted. Your claim has been flagged for additional review, she told me. Why? I asked, gripping the phone. The company went bankrupt. It is public record. There is no dispute. It says here there is a complexity regarding the separation reason, she recited robotically. We need to verify that it wasn't a discharge for misconduct, and with the bankruptcy trustee involved, it takes time. I don't have time, I said, my voice rising. I have a daughter. I have rent. I'm sorry, ma'am. You just have to wait. I couldn't wait. The job market certainly wasn't waiting. I revamped my resume. I applied to 40 jobs in the first week, design firms, architectural suppliers, logistics companies. I was overqualified for entry-level and, apparently, too risky for senior roles in a contracting market. The construction industry was slowing down. Interest rates were up. Nobody was hiring project managers. I stopped applying for careers and started applying for survival. I signed up for every gig economy app that would accept a driver with a 10-year-old car. I became a courier of other people's conveniences. I spent my days driving Thai food and bubble tea to houses that looked like the one I used to own. I delivered groceries to women who looked like I did 2 years ago, harried, busy. typing on Blackberries while I hauled cases of sparkling water onto their porches for a $3 tip. The math of poverty became my entire world. It is a brutal, unforgiving calculus. I had a notebook. On the left side, I wrote the incoming cash DoorDash $42, Fiverr logo design $15, Facebook Marketplace sale of winter coat $20. On the right side, I wrote the outgoing gas $35, Maya's lunch money $5, internet bill $70. Every day was a choice between two essential things. If I bought gas to drive to the delivery zone, I couldn't buy meat for dinner. If I paid the internet bill so Maya could submit her homework, I couldn't pay the car insurance. I stopped eating lunch. I told Maya I was fasting for health reasons. I started drinking water to fill the empty space in my stomach. I sold everything that wasn't bolted down. My blender, the spare television, my wedding dress, which went for $50 to a thrift shop because it had a stain on the hem. But you cannot outrun a tsunami with a bucket. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, taped to the front door in a bright orange envelope that screamed for the neighbors to look. Notice to quit, 5 days. I called the landlord. Mr. Henderson. He was a decent man. A retired teacher who had always been kind to Maya. I thought I could reason with him. I thought I could explain about Larkwell, about the frozen unemployment, about the delay. I'm sorry, Vivian, he said, and he sounded genuinely sad. But you are 2 months behind, and my property manager ran a soft check on your credit for the lease renewal. I closed my eyes. Peter, your score is under 500. Mr. Henderson said gently, it shows defaults. It shows a charge-off. My insurance won't let me keep a tenant with that profile. It is a liability issue. Mr. Henderson, that is not my debt, I pleaded. My husband, he committed fraud. I am fighting it. I believe you, he said. But the paper says what it says. You have to be out by Sunday. Sunday. That weekend was a blur of frantic, silent motion. We couldn't afford a moving truck. We couldn't afford a storage unit. We had to fit our lives into the trunk of a Toyota Camry. I had to stand in Maya's bedroom and tell her to choose. Distinct books, I said, my voice trembling. Pick 5 books, pick 7 outfits, the rest has to stay. Maya looked at her bookshelf. She looked at the posters on her wall. She didn't argue. She didn't throw a tantrum. She just nodded, her face shutting down, turning into that blank mask she had started wearing since the funeral. She packed her SAT prep books first. We left the furniture. We left the kitchenware. We left the ghosts of the life we were trying to fake. Sunday night, we parked in the back lot of a 24-hour gym. I had bought a membership for $10 a month. It was our bathroom. It was our shower. Okay, I said, turning around to face Maya in the back seat. The car was stuffed with bags, smelling of old laundry and anxiety. Here is the plan. We sleep here. We shower at the gym in the morning. I take you to school. I work the delivery apps all day. We do laundry at the place on 4th Street because it has free Wi-Fi. It is temporary, just until the unemployment check clears. Maya nodded. She pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her coat around herself. It's okay, Mom. It's like camping. It wasn't like camping. It was like dying. But you were still awake to watch it happen. The next morning, after a cold sleep and a shower in a stall that smelled of bleach and other people's sweat, I sat in the car and called the unemployment office again. I was desperate. I needed to know why the money was stuck. I was ready to beg. I got a different agent this time. A man. He sounded bored, clicking away on a keyboard. Claim number ending in 45, he muttered. Right. It is still under flag. Why? I demanded. It has been 6 weeks. The company is gone. There is no one to contest the claim. Well, that is the weird part, the agent said, his voice perking up slightly with curiosity. We received a tip. A verification call came in regarding your eligibility. Someone stated that you were working off the books and failing to report income. That triggers an automatic fraud hold. My blood ran cold. That is a lie. I am reporting every cent I make from the delivery apps. Who called? Who said that? I can't give you the name, ma'am. It is anonymous. Where did they call from? I asked. Please, I am living in my car. You have to help me. Maybe it was the desperation in my voice. Maybe he just didn't care about the rules. I can't see the number, he said. But the system logged the area code of the incoming report. It came from the 262 area. 262. The phone slipped in my hand. Milwaukee is area code 414. 262 is the suburbs. It is the Lake Country. It is Oconomowoc. It is where my father lives. I stared at the dashboard. A tip, an anonymous tip claiming I was committing fraud. That wasn't just bad luck. That wasn't a bureaucratic error. That was a precision strike. Someone knew I was on the edge. Someone knew exactly which lever to pull to make sure I fell off. My mind raced back to the V. Tyrell Consulting Group. I thought about Marla's comment about my lack of judgment. I thought about the text message they are watching. I had thought the text was paranoia. Now, I realized it was a warning. I wasn't just failing, I was being pushed. I hung up the phone. I looked at Maya, who was sitting on the curb outside the gym, reading her biology textbook in the morning sun. She looked so small, so determined to be normal in a world that had gone crazy. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to disappear, to dissolve into the poverty statistics and never embarrass them again. They cut off the money. They blocked the aid. They were starving us out. I gripped the steering wheel. I felt a cold, hard stone form in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Get in the car, Maya, I called out. She looked up, startled. Are we going to school? Yes, I said. And then I am going to make a phone call. I wasn't going to call the unemployment office again. I wasn't going to call a lawyer I couldn't afford. I was going to call the one person my father had spent 30 years trying to erase. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they forgot that while they were fighting to protect a reputation, I was fighting for my daughter's life. And that made me the most dangerous person in the zip code. The deadline was a physical thing. Sitting in the back seat of the Camry like a third passenger, the state aptitude test was 48 hours away. For Maya, this was not just a test. It was the escape hatch. It was the only way to get a scholarship, the only way to get a degree, the only way to ensure she didn't end up like me, 37, master's degree in hand, freezing in a parking lot. But you cannot study for a calculus section when your fingers are numb. You cannot memorize history dates when the police scanner app on your mother's phone is buzzing every 20 minutes to warn of patrols clearing out vagrants from the area. I looked at Maya. She was asleep, her head resting against the cold window, a flashlight still clutched in her hand. Her breath was coming in short. White puffs. We had been living in the car for 5 days. The novelty of camping had worn off. The reality of hygiene, of hunger, of the crushing lack of privacy was setting in. I knew, with the certainty of a woman who had checked every other door, that I had to knock on the one that had already been slammed in my face. I needed 2 weeks, just 14 days, enough time for Maya to take the test, finish the semester, and for me to fight the unemployment hold. I drove out of the gym parking lot and headed toward the one place I swore I would never return. I didn't drive all the way to the driveway. I parked on the shoulder of the road, 3 blocks down, where the trees obscured my battered car but gave me a clear line of sight to the house on Ridley Lane. It was glowing. The house looked like a cruise ship docked in a sea of darkness. Every window was lit. The landscape lighting highlighted the manicured hedges and the stone lions at the gate. It was a fortress of comfort. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the contact. I knew about the sabotage now. I knew about the call to the unemployment office from the 262 area code. Calling him was walking into a trap, but I had no other leverage. I dialed. What is it now? Vivian? He didn't say hello. He checked the caller ID and went straight to the annoyance. I am parked 3 streets away, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of someone holding a grenade. I am not asking for money. Dad, I am not asking for a loan. Maya has her SATs on Saturday. She hasn't slept in a bed in 5 nights. I need you to let us stay in the guest wing. Just for 2 weeks. 14 days. Then we leave. I will sign a paper if you want. Vivian. He sighed. The sound of a man being asked to donate to a charity he doesn't believe in. We have been over this. It is simply not a good time. Why? I asked. Why is it not a good time? The house is 6,000 square feet. You have 5 bedrooms. Dad, you have a heated yoga studio that Marla uses once a month. You have that ridiculous room you converted into a vlog studio for Brielle's influencer phase that lasted 3 weeks. You have an art studio that has never seen a drop of paint. Do not tell me you don't have space for a cot and a desk. It is not about square footage, he snapped. It is about the atmosphere. Brielle's 21st birthday is this weekend. We have caterers coming. We have decorators. It is going to be a significant event. We have guests flying in from the coast. Guests, I repeated. You have room for strangers, but not for your granddaughter. Those guests are business associates. Vivian, people of consequence. I cannot have. He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound as monstrous as he meant it to be. I cannot have a distraction. You and Maya, you bring a certain heaviness. Marla is working very hard to make this perfect for Brielle. It is her moment. Maya is your blood, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a scream. She is your first grandchild. She is sleeping in a car while you plan a gala for Brielle. Maya is your daughter, Franklin said cold, hard, and final. She is not Marla's blood. She is not part of this household. Marla is uncomfortable with the arrangement. She feels that you bring drama. She feels that having you here would cast a shadow over Brielle's celebration. And frankly, I agree. You made your choices. You chose a thief for a husband. You chose to be a victim. Do not bring that energy into my house. Give me the phone, Franklin. I heard the shuffle of the device being passed. Then, Marla's voice. It wasn't the polite, passive-aggressive voice she used at family dinners. It was the voice of the gatekeeper. Vivian, she said, let me make this crystal clear because your father is too polite to say it. You are a recurring accident. Every time we think you are stable, you find a way to blow up your life. First the divorce, then the job, now this homelessness stunt. It is not a stunt, I said through gritted teeth. I was sabotaged. I know about the call to the unemployment office. Marla, I have no idea what you are talking about, she said. Too quickly. But that is typical. Isn't it always a conspiracy? Always someone else's fault? Look at yourself. You are 37. You are begging for a bed. You are pathetic. And you want to bring that girl into my home, into Brielle's space. Maya is a sweet girl, I suppose. But she has that look, that desperate, hungry look. It makes people uncomfortable. We are not turning this house into a shelter just because you failed to launch. I looked at Maya. She was awake. The flashlight was off. She was staring at me, in the silence of the car, with the phone pressed to my ear. I knew she could hear every word. The desperate, hungry look. The stunt. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a break. It was a shift. The daughter who wanted approval died in that front seat. The mother who wanted revenge was born. You listen to me, I said. My voice changed. It became lower. You talk about this house like it is yours. Marla, you talk about the guest wing and the yoga studio like you earned them, but we both know the truth. Don't you dare. Franklin's voice came back on the line, distant, as if he was leaning over Marla's shoulder. I remember the trust documents. Dad, I said. I was young, but I wasn't deaf. I remember what Grandma Eleanor said when you moved in. This house isn't yours. It belongs to the Hale Family Trust. And last I checked, Grandma is still the primary trustee. Stop it, Franklin hissed. Don't you bring her into this. She is in a home. She is confused. She doesn't know what day it is. Does she? I asked. Or is that just what you tell people so they don't ask why the matriarch of the family is rotting in a facility while you throw galas in her living room? What would happen if I went to see her? Dad. What would happen if I told her that her great-granddaughter is sleeping in a Toyota while you buy champagne for Brielle? You stay away from her, Franklin shouted. It was the first time I had heard him lose control. She is fragile. You will kill her with your drama if you go near that nursing home. Vivian, I will make sure you never work in this state again. I will make sure that fraud investigation on your unemployment becomes a criminal matter. Do not test me. Then let us in, I challenged. No, Marla screamed. Absolutely not. I will not have it. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I had drawn blood. I had found the soft spot in the armor. I turned to Maya. She was sitting perfectly still. Her face was illuminated by the passing headlights of a car driving toward my father's house, a Lexus. Silver, sleek, probably a caterer or an early guest. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. Maya didn't cry. She didn't look broken. She looked thoughtful. It is okay, she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. I needed to hear it. He doesn't mean it, I lied again, out of habit. He is just... Mom, stop. Maya cut me off. He means it. Marla means it. We are dirt to them. She paused, looking down at her hands. I tried, Tried what? I tried to fix it. Last week, before we got kicked out of the apartment. I stared at her. What do you mean? I found Brielle on Instagram, Maya said. I sent her a DM. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be mad. I thought she is my aunt, right? She is only 5 years older than me. We used to play together when we were little. I thought maybe she would get it. What did you say? I asked, my heart breaking for her. I just said, hey, it is Maya. Things are really bad. Mom is trying her best, but we are scared. Can you talk to Grandpa? We just need a little help. Simple stuff. And Maya pulled her phone out. She opened the app and turned the screen toward me. There was the message, and right below it, in small gray letters, seen Monday, 8:15 p.m. She read it, Maya said. She read it 4 days ago. She didn't block me. She didn't reply. She just watched it, like it was a TV show. I looked at the screen. That little scene receipt was more violent than anything Marla had said. It was the silence of complicity. Brielle wasn't just a spoiled child anymore. She was an adult who had seen a distress flare from her own flesh and blood and decided to scroll past it. She is having a birthday party, I said, my voice hollow. A big one. I know, Maya said. I saw the stories. She is posting polls about what dress to wear. Gold or silver? I looked out the windshield at the house down the street. I could see the silhouette of figures moving in the windows. They were warm. They were safe. They were preparing to celebrate the existence of the perfect daughter, funded by money that likely wasn't even theirs, in a house they didn't own, while the mistake daughter and the embarrassing grandchild sat in the cold. I started the car. Where are we going? Maya asked. The gym. No, I said. I looked at the house one last time, burning the image into my retinas. I wanted to remember exactly how bright it looked, so I would appreciate it when the lights went out. We aren't going to the gym yet. Then where? We are going to find out if your grandfather is a liar, I said. He said Grandma Eleanor is confused. He said she is fragile. He said she doesn't know what is going on. I put the car in gear and pulled a U-turn, the tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. We are going to go see the only person in this family who might actually have a spine left, I said. We are going to finding Grandma, and if she is as sharp as I remember, then Franklin just made the biggest mistake of his life by threatening me with her name. I drove away from the warmth of the mansion, back into the dark, freezing tunnel of the night. But this time, I wasn't driving away from my problem. I was driving toward the solution, and the solution was 90 years old, and if my memory served me right, she hated liars more than anything on earth. before I could drive to the nursing home. I needed ammunition. I knew that walking into a facility at 10 o'clock at night demanding to see an elderly woman would get me arrested. Not welcomed. I needed authority. I needed to know exactly where the lines of power were drawn before I stepped onto the battlefield. There was only one person in the Hale family orbit who hadn't treated me like a contagion: Grant Hale. He was my father's younger brother, a man who had committed the family's cardinal sin. He chose to be useful rather than just rich. Uncle Grant was a probate and real estate attorney with a small practice in Madison. He didn't attend the galas. He didn't spend his summers in the Hamptons. He drove a Volvo, wore cardigans that had seen better days, and sent me a handwritten card every year for my birthday. I hadn't received one this year, but considering I didn't have a mailbox, that wasn't his fault. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat to use their Wi-Fi signal. Maya was dozing in the passenger seat, the stress of the last hour finally pulling her under. I opened my laptop. The battery was critical, but I had enough juice for a video call. I found Grant's personal cell number in my old email contacts. I texted him first. "It's Vivian. Emergency. Please don't tell Dad I'm contacting you. Can we talk?" The 3 dots of a typing indicator appeared almost instantly. "Call me," I dialed. He answered on the first ring. "Vivian." His voice was rough, thick with sleep or worry. "My God, I have been trying to reach you for 3 months. Your number was disconnected. I called Peter's number and it was out of service. Where are you?" "I am in a car, Grant," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "I am in a car with Maya. We are in Milwaukee. We have nowhere to live." There was a heavy silence on the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor and the click of a lamp turning on. "Tell me," he said. I told him. I gave him the abridged version: the bankruptcy, Peter's theft, the house foreclosure, the denial of unemployment, and the phone call with Franklin 10 minutes ago. I left out the emotion. I gave him the facts. When I finished, Grant let out a long, slow breath. "He told you the house was his?" Grant asked. "He told you Marla had the final say?" "Yes. He said I wasn't family. He said the house was full." "Vivian," Grant said, his voice sharpening into his professional tone. "Franklin is lying. He doesn't own that house on Ridley Lane. He doesn't even own the furniture inside it." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "That house is the primary asset of the Eleanor Hale Revocable Trust," Grant explained. "When Dad died, Mom, your grandmother, didn't trust Franklin with the capital. She set up a trust structure. She is the grantor and the primary trustee. Franklin has what is called a life estate interest subject to behavior clauses. Essentially, he is a tenant. He is allowed to live there as long as he maintains the property and provides a home for the lineal descendants." "Lineal descendants," I repeated. "That includes me. That includes Maya." "Exactly," Grant said. "He has no legal right to exclude you. In fact, if he refuses to shelter a descendant in a time of crisis while occupying the trust property, he is in breach of the fiduciary duty implied by his occupancy agreement. He could be evicted." I felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my throat. My father wasn't the king of the castle. He was a squatter with a good tailor. "But it gets worse, Vivian," Grant continued, and I could hear the sound of him typing rapidly on a keyboard. "I have been watching the trust filings from a distance. I don't represent the trust directly. Mom has a corporate firm for that, but I have access to the public records and some family disclosures. There has been a significant bleed in the liquid assets over the last 2 years. Maintenance costs that exceed the value of the home. Consulting fees for estate management." "Consulting fees," I whispered. The words triggered a memory of the bank statement I had seen on Peter's laptop. "Grant," I said, my voice trembling, "can you look something up for me, please? It is important. Name it. V. Tyrell Financial Group, or V. Tyrell Solutions." "Hold on." I waited. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Outside the car, a police cruiser rolled slowly through the parking lot, its spotlight sweeping over the rows of washing machines. I ducked lower in the seat, praying they wouldn't see the condensation on my windows. "Okay," Grant said. I am looking at a corporate trace. V. Tyrell is a shell company registered in Delaware. No employees, just a mailbox. But look at the officers. Who are they? The registered agent is a lawyer I know in Chicago, but the managing member is a holding company called Obsidian Capstone. An Obsidian Capstone. Grant paused, and I heard a sharp intake of breath. Vivian, did you say your company, Larkwell, went under because of a contractor dispute? Yes, I said. A major construction firm pulled out of a massive project mid-build and sued us for breach, triggering the liquidity crisis. It was called Apex Structural. Obsidian Capstone owns Apex Structural, Grant said. The world stopped spinning. It just froze. Repeat that, I said. The same holding company that owns the fake financial group your husband was sending money to also owns the construction company that bankrupted your employer, Grant said, his voice cold with realization. These aren't separate events. Vivian, this is a closed loop. I felt bile rise in my throat. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just a cheating husband and a failing economy. It was an orchestrated demolition. Why? I asked. Why destroy me? I am nobody. I am just a project manager. You aren't nobody, Grant said. You are the only other person besides Franklin who has the ear of Eleanor Hale. If Franklin is looting the trust, and I suspect he is draining millions, he needs you distracted. I looked at Maya sleeping next to me. They had starved my daughter. They had let my mother die in a hospice ward with me begging for pennies. They had humiliated us, and they had done it all with a spreadsheet and a smile. I am going to kill him, I said. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a statement of intent. I wanted to tear his life down brick by brick. No, Grant said firmly. You are not going to do anything illegal. That is what they want. They want you to scream on their lawn so they can call the police and get a restraining order. That fits their narrative. We are going to do this the right way. We are going to use the one weapon they are terrified of. What is that? Sovereignty, Grant said. We are going to put the crown back on the right head. Grandma? Grandma, he confirmed. Vivian, you need to call her, tonight. Grant, she is 90, I argued, fear creeping back in. Franklin said she is confused. He said she is fragile. If I call her and upset her... Franklin is a liar, Grant cut me off. I visited her 3 months ago. She isn't confused. She is furious. She knows something is wrong. But Franklin isolates her. He screens her calls. He tells the staff not to let anyone in without his permission. He tells her you are busy, that you are traveling, that you don't care. He is gaslighting her just like he gaslighted you. But if he controls the staff, he controls the visitor log, Grant said. He can't control her personal cell phone. He thinks she doesn't know how to use it, so he doesn't check it. But I bought her a burner smartphone last year and taught her how to keep it charged. I hid it in her knitting bag. Grant dictated a number to me. It wasn't in my contacts. It was a random set of digits. She keeps it on silent, Grant said. Call her. If she answers, tell her the truth, all of it. Don't protect her feelings. Respect her enough to give her the intelligence. What if she doesn't believe me? Vivian, Grant said softly. She is the woman who built the Hale fortune while her husband was playing golf. She doesn't believe in coincidences. She believes in evidence. You are the evidence. I wrote the number down on a napkin from the glove compartment. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. Thank you, Grant, I said. Don't thank me yet, he said. Just survive the night. I am driving down from Madison tomorrow morning. I will meet you at the party. If we do this, we do it publicly. We do it so they can't sweep it under the rug. I hung up the laptop. I closed the lid. I looked at the number on the napkin. I picked up my phone. 7% battery. Enough. I dialed the number. It rang, and rang, and rang. I was about to hang up, thinking Grant was wrong, thinking the phone was dead or discovered. Then, there was a click. Hello? The voice was old, paper-thin, raspy with age, but it was sharp. It lacked the fuzzy, medicated slur of the senile. It was alert. "Grandma?" I whispered. "It's Vivian." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence that stretched for 5 seconds. I held my breath. Had she forgotten me? Had Franklin's lies taken root? Then, Eleanor Hale spoke. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the frailty, revealing the steel that had always been underneath. "You finally called," she said. "I have been waiting." I held the phone against my ear like it was a physical anchor, the only thing keeping me from drifting off into the freezing void of the Wisconsin night. The voice on the other end was not the fragile, confused whisper of a woman in decline. It was the voice of a woman who had built an empire from a single hardware store in 1962. It was sharp, granular, and terrifyingly lucid. "Grandma," I repeated, my voice cracking. "I didn't think you would answer." Franklin said, "Franklin says a great many things," Eleanor Hale interrupted. "Most of them are designed to keep his wallet full and my mouth shut. Put me on speakerphone. Vivian, I know Maya is in the car with you." I froze. I looked at Maya. She was staring at the dashboard, her eyes wide. I pressed the speaker button with a trembling finger and set the phone on the center console, right next to the gear shift that I had been gripping for 3 days straight. "We can hear you, Grandma," I said. "Good," Eleanor said. Her voice filled the small, cold cabin of the sedan. "Now, listen to me closely because I am not going to repeat myself. I know you are sleeping in a parking lot. Grant told me. I know you lost the house. And I know that my son, your father, told you that you are not family. I am so sorry. Grandma," I began, the shame washing over me in a hot wave. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to worry you. I tried to fix it on my own. I failed." "Stop it," she commanded. It wasn't angry, but it was firm, like a gavel striking wood. "You did not fail. You were hunted. There is a difference. Do not apologize for bleeding when someone else is holding the knife." The silence that followed was heavy. Maya shifted in her seat, pulling her blanket tighter. "Is it true?" Eleanor asked, her voice softening just a fraction, losing the judicial edge and gaining a sudden, heartbreaking depth. "Is it true about Elena? Did she pass?" I choked back a sob. "Yes, last month. It was cancer. It was fast at the end." "Franklin didn't tell me," Eleanor said. The anger was back, but it was cold now. It was the temperature of deep space. "He told me she had moved to Florida. He told me she was happy." She paused, and I heard the rustle of fabric, as if she was shifting in her chair. "I liked your mother, Vivian. She had a spine. She was the only one in that house who didn't look at me like I was a checkbook. I still keep her photo. It is in my Bible, the one of her holding you when you were 3. I looked at Maya. Tears were streaming down her face, silent and fast. To hear that my mother, who had been treated like a disposal problem by Franklin and Marla, was enshrined in the matriarch's most private possession broke something open in my chest. It was the first time in months I felt seen. "Franklin didn't go to the funeral," I whispered. "I know," Eleanor said. "He was too busy buying balloons for a party he isn't paying for." "Grandma," I said, needing to understand the battlefield. "Grant said the house, he said it isn't Dad's. Is that true?" "That house," Eleanor said, articulating every syllable, "belongs to the Eleanor Hale Revocable Trust. I bought that land in 1985. I built that structure. Franklin lives there because I allow it. He lives there under a life estate provision. Do you know what that means? Vivian." Grant explained it. "It means he is a tenant." "It means he is a caretaker," she corrected. "And the contract has clauses, specific clauses regarding the treatment of lineal descendants. He has forgotten that he serves at the pleasure of the trust. He thinks because I am old, and because I am in this facility, that I have stopped reading the paperwork. He thinks I am dead. He is about to find out that I am very much alive." "He wouldn't let us in," Maya spoke up suddenly. Her voice was small but clear. "He said Marla was uncomfortable. He said I was embarrassing. Who is that? Eleanor asked instantly. Is that Maya? Yes, ma'am, Maya said. Maya, Eleanor said, and her voice changed completely. It became warm, protective, almost fierce. I heard about your job. Grant told me you are working at a bakery. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, and a grocery store on weekends. Good, Eleanor said. There is honor in that. Do not let that man or that woman he married ever make you feel small for earning $1. The only people who should be embarrassed are the ones who live on money they didn't earn and then close the door on their own blood. You are a Hale. You are an Ortiz. You come from women who work. You hold your head up. Maya nodded, even though Eleanor couldn't see her. Yes, Grandma. Now, Eleanor said, the business tone returning. This party, Brielle's birthday, when is it? Saturday, I said. Saturday night? At the Lakeview Country Club. It is supposed to be a black tie gala. Saturday, Eleanor mused. 2 days. That is enough time. Enough time for what? I asked. Grandma, we can't go there. Franklin explicitly told us to stay away. Marla said if we showed up, we would be ruining the aesthetic. We don't have clothes. We haven't showered in a real bathroom in 2 days. We are homeless. Grandma? You are not homeless, Eleanor declared. You are temporarily displaced due to criminal mismanagement of family assets, and you are going to that party. Why? I asked, panic rising. To beg him again, he won't listen. He will have security throw us out. We are not going there to beg, Eleanor said. We are going there to testify, and security works for the venue. The venue is rented by the trust. I pay the bills. Vivian. Therefore, I decide who stays and who goes. But we can't just walk in looking like this, I argued. It would just prove Marla right. It would look like we are the disaster she says we are. I have arranged for that, Eleanor said calmly. Grant is already on his way. He will be in Milwaukee by tomorrow morning. He has a key to a corporate apartment downtown that belongs to his firm. It is clean. It is warm. You will sleep there. You will shower. And there is a package waiting for you at the concierge desk. I had Grant pick up some things from a boutique he likes. It won't be couture, but it will be dignified. You will wear it. You will look like my granddaughter, not his victim. I felt the tears finally spill over. It wasn't just the offer of a bed. It was the strategy. She wasn't just rescuing us. She was rearming us. Grandma, I said. Why? Why now you've been quiet for so long? Because I was gathering the numbers, she said, and then her voice dropped to a register that sent a shiver down my spine, not of fear, but of awe. I may be old, Vivian, but I am not blind. I saw the withdrawals. I saw the consulting fees. I saw the money moving to shell companies that don't exist. I hired a forensic accountant 6 months ago, a man named Mr. Sterling. He used to work for the IRS Criminal Division. He has been building a file. You knew? I gasped. You knew about the theft. I suspected, she corrected. I suspected Franklin was greedy. I suspected Marla was manipulative. But I didn't know the extent of it until Grant told me what they did to you. The bankruptcy of your company, the credit fraud, the unemployment interference. That isn't just greed, Vivian. That is malice. They aren't just skimming off the top. They are cannibalizing the family to feed their own vanity. They crossed a line. And when you cross a line with me, you don't get a warning. You get a verdict. What are we going to do? I asked. Mr. Sterling is ready, Eleanor said. Grant is ready, and I am ready. I am checking myself out of this facility on Saturday afternoon. My doctors have already cleared it for a family visitation. Franklin thinks I am coming to sit in a wheelchair and drool in the corner while he toasts his success. He has no idea that I am bringing the audit. Grandma, he threatened you, I said, remembering Franklin's shouting on the phone. He said you were fragile. He said if I dragged you into this, he would destroy me. Let him try, she said. He is a 55-year-old boy playing with a loaded gun, and he doesn't realize the safety is off and the barrel is pointed at his own foot. He thinks power is a big house and a fast car. He forgot that power is owning the signature on the deed. So we just show up. You show up, she said. You walk in through the front door. You do not hide. You do not lower your eyes. You find me. I will be sitting at the head table, whether they like it or not. And when the time comes, Vivian, you do not need to scream. You do not need to fight Marla. You do not need to argue with your husband. Peter will be there, I realized suddenly. If he is connected to the fake company, he might be there. Good, Eleanor said. Save the gas. We can bury them all in the same hole. What do I do? I asked. What is my role? Your role is to stand, Eleanor said. You stand next to me, you hold Maya's hand, and you let me speak. I have been silent for 30 years to keep the peace. Saturday night, I am going to burn the peace to the ground to save the family. Okay, I said. Okay, Grandma. Go to the apartment, she ordered. Get some sleep, eat a hot meal, wash your hair. When you walk into that room on Saturday, I want you to look like an Ortiz. I want you to look like Elena's daughter. Do you understand? I understand. Good night. Vivian, tell Maya I love her. We love you too. The line clicked dead. I sat there in the silence of the parking lot, but the car didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like a staging ground. The despair that had been crushing my lungs for weeks had evaporated. Replaced by a cold, crystalline focus, I looked at Maya. She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling. It was a small, fierce smile. She's a badass, Maya whispered. Yes, I said, putting the car in drive. She is. I navigated out of the lot, heading toward the highway that would take us downtown to the address Grant had just texted me. We weren't refugees anymore. We were witnesses for the prosecution, and court was in session in 48 hours. The Lakeview Country Club was not merely a building. It was a statement of exclusion carved out of limestone and glass, situated on the edge of the frozen lake. It glowed against the dark Wisconsin sky like a radioactive jewel. The driveway was lined with imported birch trees wrapped in thousands of tiny white lights, and the valet stand was a parade of German engineering. I watched a Bentley pull up, followed by a Porsche, followed by the specific kind of black SUV that suggests the passenger is either a diplomat or a defendant in a high-profile white-collar crime. I parked the Toyota Camry 3 rows back in the self-park lot, wedged between a snowplow and a catering van. It was the only place we fit. Are you ready? I asked, turning to Maya. She was wearing the dress Uncle Grant had left for her in the apartment. It was a simple navy blue sheath, modest but well cut, paired with a cardigan that hid the fact that her arms were still shivering from a week of malnutrition. Her hair was clean, pulled back into a tight bun. She didn't look like a girl who had slept in a car yesterday. She looked like a young woman who had seen too much of the world too soon. I am ready if you are, she said. Her voice was steady, but I saw her hand gripping the door handle until her knuckles were white. Remember what Grandma said, I reminded her. Head up. You are an Ortiz. You are a Hale. You belong in that room more than half the people there. We walked to the entrance. The cold wind whipped off the lake, biting at my exposed ankles. But I didn't feel it. I was burning with a different kind of heat. The doorman, a young man in a heavy coat, looked at us with a moment of hesitation. We didn't have the fur coats or the jewelry that the other women wore. We looked like the staff, or perhaps poor relations. Name? He asked, holding a tablet. Vivian Ortiz, I said. And Maya Ortiz, he scrolled. I held my breath. If Franklin had blacklisted us, if he had put security on alert, this would be over before it began. I don't see an Ortiz, the doorman said, frowning. Check under the trust, I said, my voice hard. The Eleanor Hale Trust. We are the primary beneficiaries. He blinked, typed something into the search bar, and then his eyebrows shot up. The screen must have flashed a clearance code he wasn't expecting. My apologies, Ms. Ortiz, he said, stepping aside and opening the heavy oak door. "Right this way. The Hale party is in the grand ballroom." We stepped inside. The heat hit us first, a wall of warmth smelling of expensive lilies, roasted prime rib, and old money. The foyer was marble, reflecting the light of a crystal chandelier that hung like a frozen explosion from the ceiling. We could hear the music, a live jazz quartet playing a sanitized version of a pop song drifting from the double doors ahead. We walked in. The room was a sea of black ties and sequins. There were at least 200 people there. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd like ghosts, carrying silver trays of champagne. At the far end of the room, a stage had been erected with a massive screen displaying a slideshow of Brielle in Paris, Brielle on a yacht, Brielle holding a diploma. It was a shrine to a life that had been perfectly curated, bought and paid for by a fortune she didn't understand. I scanned the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wasn't looking for the bar. I was looking for the targets. I saw them near the ice sculpture. Franklin was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car. He was holding a scotch, laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying. Marla was next to him, draped in a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. She looked triumphant. She looked like the queen of a kingdom she had finally conquered. And then she saw me. The glass of champagne in her hand didn't drop, but it tilted dangerously. Her smile froze, then shattered. She grabbed Franklin's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Franklin turned. His eyes found mine across the room. I expected anger. I expected the arrogant dismissal he had given me on the phone 2 nights ago. But what I saw was panic, pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me. Then he looked at the guests around him, then back at me. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of the scene. He was afraid of the interruption. He said something to the man in the gray suit, excused himself, and began walking toward us. He moved fast, his face set in a rictus of forced pleasantry, but his eyes were murderous. "What are you doing here?" he hissed when he got within striking distance. He didn't yell. He kept his voice low, a poisonous whisper meant only for us. He stepped between us and the main crowd, using his body as a shield to block us from view. "Hello, Dad," I said. "Happy birthday to Brielle." "I told you," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I told you on the phone, you are not welcome. Look at you. You look like you bought those clothes at a garage sale. You stand out like a sore thumb." "We look fine, Franklin," I said. "We are clean, we are presentable, and we are family." "You are a liability," he spat. "Do you have any idea who is in this room? The mayor is here. The partners from Obsidian Capstone are here. If you make a scene, if you start begging for money in front of these people, I will have security drag you out by your hair." "I am not here to beg," I said calmly. "I am here to wait." "Wait for what?" He looked at Maya, and his lip curled. "And you brought her. I told you Marla didn't want her here. Look at her. She looks like a charity case. Did you tell her to stand there and look pathetic so people would pity you?" Maya didn't flinch. She looked at her grandfather with a gaze so level, so devoid of the fear he was used to inspiring, that he actually blinked. "I am not a charity case. Grandpa," Maya said. Her voice was clear, cutting through the ambient jazz. "I work for my money. I paid for my own gas to get here. Can you say the same?" Franklin's face turned a violent shade of red. He raised a finger to point at her. But before he could speak, Marla appeared at his elbow. "Get them out!" she hissed, her smile plastered on for the benefit of the room, but her eyes darting around nervously. "Franklin, get them out now. Peter is over there. If they see each other—" She stopped. She realized what she had said. My stomach dropped. "Peter." I looked past Franklin's shoulder. I looked past the wall of socialites and the waiters, and then I saw him, Peter Walters, my husband, the man who had drained our accounts, ruined my credit, and vanished into the ether. He was standing near the buffet table. He wasn't wearing the frantic, stressed look of the man who had abandoned me. He was wearing a tuxedo, He looked healthy. He looked well-fed. And he was laughing. He was talking to a tall man with silver hair, the same man Franklin had been speaking to earlier, the man Grant had identified as a partner at Obsidian Capstone. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a divorce. It wasn't just a breakdown. Peter hadn't run away from me. He had run to them. He was here, at my half-sister's birthday party, drinking champagne with my father and stepmother. He wasn't a fugitive. He was a guest. "You knew," I whispered. I looked at Marla. "You knew where he was." Marla's face hardened. The mask of the hostess slipped, revealing the predator underneath. "He is a business associate of the firm. Vivian. He facilitated a difficult transition for the portfolio. He did what was necessary." "He stole my life," I said. "He stole Maya's college fund. And you invited him here." "He is helpful," Franklin said, regaining his composure now that the secret was out. "Unlike you, he understands how the world works. Now, leave, before this gets ugly." "It is already ugly, Dad," I said. "You just put a tuxedo on it." At that moment, Brielle appeared. She descended the grand staircase like a princess in a Disney movie, wearing a gold dress that caught every light in the room. The crowd applauded. She smiled, waving, basking in the adoration. She looked perfect. She looked like the golden child who had never known a cold night or an empty stomach. She reached the bottom of the stairs and saw us. Her smile faltered. She stopped. She looked at Maya, then at me. It wasn't a look of confusion. It was a look of recognition. She knew. She looked at Maya's simple dress, then at her own glittering gown. She looked at Franklin, who was standing over us like a bouncer, and for a second, I saw the cracks in the brand. She looked terrified. Not of us, but of the truth we represented. She looked like someone who had found a corpse under the floorboards of her beautiful house and had been trying to pretend she couldn't smell it. "Brielle," Franklin called out, his voice booming with fake joviality. "Come here, darling. Come say hello to the senator." He was trying to pivot. He was trying to distract the room. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "Walk away," he whispered to me. "Walk out that door right now. And maybe I will write you a check in the morning. Stay, and I bury you." I looked at Peter, who had finally turned and seen me. The color drained from his face. He dropped his fork. He took a step back, looking for an exit. I looked at Marla, who was signaling frantically to security. I looked at Franklin, whose grip on my arm was painful. And then, the music stopped. It didn't fade out. It stopped abruptly, as if someone had cut the power to the amplifiers. The room fell silent. The laughter died down. The clinking of glasses ceased. From the main entrance, a sound echoed against the marble floor. Thump, step, thump. It was the sound of a heavy wooden cane with a brass tip striking the stone. Franklin froze. His hand dropped from my arm. He turned toward the door, his eyes wide. "No," he whispered. "She can't be here." The double doors, which had been closed, swung open. Standing there, framed by the darkness of the foyer, was Eleanor Hale. She was not in a wheelchair. She was standing upright, leaning on the cane Grant had bought her. She was wearing a black suit that looked like it was tailored in 1950 and had lasted forever because it was made of stronger material than anything in this room. Her white hair was pulled back. Her face was a map of 90 years of iron will. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at Brielle. She looked straight at Franklin. Grant stood a step behind her, holding a briefcase. He looked tired but resolute. Eleanor took a step forward. The sound of her cane was louder than the applause had been. Thump! The crowd parted. People instinctively moved out of her way. Sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room, they didn't know who she was. Most of them thought she was dead or institutionalized, but they knew authority when they saw it. She walked through the center of the ballroom. She didn't hurry. She walked with the terrifying patience of a glacier. Franklin stood paralyzed. Marla looked like she was about to faint. Peter Walters tried to shrink behind a decorative fern. Eleanor stopped 10 feet away from us. She looked at me. She looked at the dress I was wearing. She looked at Maya. She nodded. Once, a confirmation. Then she turned to Franklin. "Mother," Franklin stammered. His voice cracked. We weren't expecting you. The doctor said." "The doctors work for me. Franklin," Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "Just like the trustees, just like the lawyers, and just like you." She moved to stand beside me. She reached out and took Maya's hand. "This is not a party," Eleanor announced to the room, lifting her chin. "This is an audit." The silence in the ballroom was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. 200 people, representing the accumulated wealth and influence of the Lake Country, stood motionless, their champagne glasses suspended halfway to their mouths. The jazz band had lowered their instruments. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of my grandmother's cane on the marble floor as she closed the distance between us. Eleanor Hale did not look at the mayor. She did not look at the partners of the law firms or the CEOs of the local tech startups. She stopped directly in front of me. She let go of her cane, allowing it to lean against her hip, and reached out with both hands. Her skin was like parchment paper, thin and translucent, but her grip was iron. She took my face in her hands, her thumbs brushing away the exhaustion under my eyes. Then, she pulled me into her chest. It was a hug that smelled of lavender and old books, the scent of my childhood before everything went wrong. She held me tight, not like a fragile old woman, but like a shield. Then she released me, turned to Maya, and took her cold, trembling hand. She lifted Maya's hand high, gripping it firmly, and turned to face the room. "For those of you who are confused," Eleanor said, her voice projecting with the practiced cadence of a woman who had run boardrooms in the 1970s. "This is Vivian Ortiz, my granddaughter, and this is Maya Ortiz, my great-granddaughter. They are Hales, they are my blood, and they are the only reason this family still has a pulse." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. I saw phones being raised. The red recording lights were blinking like tiny eyes in the semi-darkness. Franklin stepped forward, his face a mask of panicked sweat. He tried to force a smile, but it looked like a grimace. He reached out to touch Eleanor's elbow, a patronizing gesture meant to guide a confused senior citizen back to the shadows. "Mother," he said, his voice pitched loud enough for the guests to hear. "You are clearly overwrought. This is a celebration. Let's get you to a chair in the private lounge. We can discuss family misunderstandings away from the festivities." Eleanor didn't move. She didn't even look at his hand. She simply shifted her gaze to his face, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Misunderstandings," she repeated. The word sounded like a curse. "Is that what we are calling them now? Franklin? Was it a misunderstanding when you missed Elena's funeral to buy balloons? Was it a misunderstanding when you told your own daughter 2 nights ago that she was not family?" The crowd gasped. It was a collective, sharp intake of breath. Franklin flinched as if he had been slapped. "Mother, please," he hissed, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Not here. These are my associates. This is Brielle's night." "And what about Maya's night?" Eleanor asked, her voice rising, cutting through his defense. "You told me she was an embarrassment. You told me that a child working a job to feed herself was a stain on your reputation. You looked at a 16-year-old girl who sleeps in a car because of your negligence, and you mocked her for having dirty hands." She pointed the tip of her cane at him. "You want to talk about embarrassment? Franklin Embarrassment is a grown man living in a mansion he doesn't own, spending money he didn't earn, pretending to be a king while his kin freeze in a parking lot 3 miles away." "This is a private matter," Franklin shouted, losing his composure. The veneer of the polite host cracked, revealing the frightened bully underneath. "You have no right to air this laundry in public. It is dignified. It is cruel. Cruel." Eleanor laughed. A dry, sharp sound. "You left them on the street. Franklin, you made it public the moment you decided that your image was worth more than their lives. If you humiliate them in the open, you pay the price in the open." She signaled to Grant. My uncle stepped forward. He placed the leather briefcase on a high cocktail table near the ice sculpture. The crowd parted around him. He didn't look like the poor relation anymore. He looked like the executioner. He opened the case and pulled out a thick stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. "For the benefit of the room," Grant announced, his voice steady and professional. "And specifically for the benefit of the current occupants of the Ridley Lane estate, let us clarify the ownership structure." He held up the first document. "The residence at 42 Ridley Lane is the sole property of the Eleanor Hale Revocable Trust," Grant stated. "Franklin Hale resides there under a conditional life estate agreement. Dated August 14, 1998, Clause 4, Section B clearly states that the occupant must provide shelter and aid to any direct lineal descendant of the grantor in times of documented crisis, provided said descendants are not engaged in criminal activity." Grant looked at Franklin over the top of his reading glasses. "Vivian Ortiz requested shelter for 2 weeks," Grant said. "You denied it. That is a material breach of the residency contract. As of this moment, your status has shifted from tenant to trespasser awaiting eviction proceedings." Marla surged forward, her silver dress rustling violently. Her face was twisted with fury. "This is insane. You can't just walk in here and read legal code. We have rights. We have put hundreds of thousands of dollars into that house. The renovations, the landscaping." "With whose money?" "Marla," Eleanor asked softly. The question hung in the air. "We put the money in," Marla shrieked. "Franklin's consulting fees, his salary." "Ah," Eleanor said. "The consulting fees," she nodded to Grant again. Grant reached back into the briefcase. This time, he didn't pull out a deed. He pulled out a spreadsheet, printed on large, 11 by 17 paper. He handed it to a man standing next to him, a short, balding man in a gray suit, who had entered with them. This was Mr. Sterling, the forensic accountant. "Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at his paper. "I have tracked the outflows from the Hale Family Trust for the past 24 months. "Mr. Sterling said. His voice was dry, factual, the voice of a man who found numbers more honest than people. "There are recurring payments totaling $1.2 million to a vendor listed as Obsidian Capstone for property management services. There are corresponding payments from the trust to a shell entity known as V. Tyrell Solutions for financial consulting." I felt my heart stop. V. Tyrell, the name on Peter's bank statement. "We traced the ownership of V. Tyrell Solutions." Mr. Sterling continued. "It is a pass-through entity. The funds enter the account, and within 48 hours, 80% of the capital is transferred to 2 personal offshore accounts. The remaining 20% is transferred to a domestic LLC registered to a Mr. Peter Walters." The name hit the room like a physical blow. All eyes turned to the fern in the corner. Peter was trying to edge toward the kitchen service door. "Peter Walters." Eleanor's voice was a whip crack. "Stop walking." Peter froze. He looked at the room full of people staring at him. He looked at the partners of Obsidian Capstone, who were now backing away from him as if he were contagious. "Grant," Eleanor said. "Explain the connection." "It is a circle," Grant said, looking directly at Peter. "Franklin and Marla authorized payments from the trust to Obsidian Capstone for work that was never done. Obsidian Capstone kicks back a portion of that money to Peter Walters to destabilize Vivian's life, to ruin her credit, to drain her accounts, to make her look incompetent so she would never be credible enough to challenge the trust management. In exchange, Peter gets his debts wiped and a seat at the table." I looked at Peter. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor. He was shaking. "Is it true?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, everyone heard it. "Peter, did you destroy us for a payout?" He looked up then. His eyes were wet, pathetic. "Vivian, you don't understand. The debt I was drowning. They offered me a way out. They said it was just reallocating family resources. They said you wouldn't be hurt. Just slowed down. Slowed down. I stepped toward him. We are living in a car. Peter, your daughter is sleeping in a Toyota. I didn't know it would go that far, Peter pleaded, looking at Franklin. You told me you would take care of them. You said you just needed her distracted so she wouldn't see the ledger. Shut up, Franklin roared. You spineless idiot. Shut up. He doesn't have to shut up, Marla screamed, stepping between Franklin and the crowd. She pointed a manicured finger at me. This is her fault. Look at her. She has always been a drain on this family. She is jealous of Brielle. She is jealous of our success. She manipulated Peter into debt, and now she is trying to blame us for her failed marriage. This is a witch hunt. Marla, Eleanor said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Stop talking. No, I won't stop, Marla yelled, her composure completely gone. I have kept this family relevant. I organized the galas, I managed the social calendar, I built this brand, while you sat in that nursing home drooling. I was the one making the Hale name mean something. You owe me. You all owe me. I owe you nothing but a subpoena. Eleanor said, You talk about building a brand. You built a facade on a foundation of theft. You are wearing a dress bought with the interest from my husband's life insurance. You are drinking champagne paid for by the dividends intended for my great-grandchildren's education. Eleanor took a step closer to Marla. You are a guest, Marla, and you have overstayed your welcome by 20 years. Marla opened her mouth to scream again, but a movement on the stairs caught everyone's eye. It was Brielle. She had come down the rest of the steps. She was standing at the edge of the dance floor. Her face was pale, the golden tan looking suddenly artificial. She was holding a clutch purse in one hand, gripping it so hard the leather was warping. Mom, Brielle said. Her voice was small, trembling. Marla whipped around. Brielle, baby, go back upstairs. This is just your grandmother is having an episode. No, Brielle said. She walked forward. She looked at me. Then she looked at her mother. Mom, the papers, the ones you made me sign last month, before I turned 21. Marla's eyes widened. Those were just tax forms, honey, standard stuff. You told me not to read them, Brielle said, tears starting to spill down her perfect makeup. You put your hand over the text and told me just to sign the bottom. You said it was for my trust fund. She looked at Grant. Uncle Grant, Brielle said, was one of those papers a waiver of my beneficiary rights in favor of a management company? Grant nodded slowly. I suspect it was. Brielle, I suspect they had you sign over your voting rights to the trust so they could approve the sale of the commercial properties without a family meeting. Brielle let out a sob. She looked at Franklin. Dad, you told me it was for my future. You told me you were protecting me. Franklin didn't answer. He couldn't look at her. He stared at the ice sculpture, which was slowly melting, dripping water onto the tablecloth. I didn't know, Brielle whispered, turning to Maya. Maya, I swear, I didn't know they were stealing. I thought we were rich. I didn't know we were thieves. The confession hung in the air like smoke. The perfect daughter, the brand ambassador, had just dismantled the last defense. Eleanor tapped her cane on the floor. Once, twice. The show is over, she declared. She turned to Franklin and Marla. Here is the judgment, Eleanor said, and it is not open for negotiation. Tonight, Vivian and Maya will be staying at the Ridley Lane house. They will take the master suite. You can't do that, Marla shrieked. That is my room. It is a room in my house, Eleanor corrected, and it is currently occupied by squatters. You have 1 hour to vacate the master suite. You may sleep in the guest quarters tonight. Provided you remain silent, tomorrow, you will receive a formal notice of intent to restructure the residency agreement. If you violate any terms, if you so much as raise your voice to Maya or Vivian, I will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing. She turned to Peter. Mr. Walters, she said, you will not be leaving town. Mr. Sterling has already forwarded his preliminary findings to the district attorney's office regarding the embezzlement. I suggest you find a lawyer who accepts payment and apologies, because your assets are being frozen as we speak." She looked out at the crowd, the silent, watching crowd. "The party is canceled," Eleanor said. "The bar is closed. Please go home, and if anyone asks you what happened here tonight, tell them that the Hale family is finally cleaning house." She turned her back on them. She took my arm with one hand and Maya's with the other. "Come," she said to us. "My feet hurt, and I believe there is a cake somewhere that hasn't been cut yet. We should take it with us." As we walked toward the exit, leaving the ruins of the gala behind us, I looked back once. Franklin was slumped in a chair, his head in his hands. Marla was screaming silently at a waiter who was backing away. Peter was sitting on the floor near the fern, looking like a deflated balloon. And Brielle was standing alone in the center of the dance floor, her golden dress shimmering under the lights, crying quietly as the guests filed out, their phones capturing every second of the collapse. We walked out into the cold night air. But for the first time in months, I wasn't freezing. I had my daughter, I had my grandmother, and I had the truth. The war wasn't over, the lawyers would fight for months, but the battle for our dignity was won. The lights of the country club faded behind us, and we walked toward the Toyota, not to sleep in it, but to drive it home. The morning after the party, the sun rose over Ridley Lane with a harsh, blinding clarity. It was the kind of light that exposed dust in the corners and cracks in the plaster, the kind of light that made it impossible to hide. I was sitting in the breakfast nook of the main house. I had slept in a bed with 800 thread count sheets, but I woke up with the same vigilance I had developed in the parking lot. I was drinking coffee from a mug that probably cost more than my weekly food budget used to be. Franklin walked in. He didn't look like the master of the universe anymore. He was wearing a bathrobe that looked slightly deflated, and his eyes were rimmed with red. He poured himself a coffee and sat across from me. He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't ask about Maya. "We can manage this," he said. It wasn't an opening. It was a pitch. "I have spoken to a PR firm in Chicago. We can spin Eleanor's outburst as a reaction to medication. We can say it was a private dispute regarding elder care that got out of hand. If you issue a statement supporting the family unity, Vivian, I can arrange for a monthly stipend, a generous one, enough to get you an apartment in the city, far away from here." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't apologizing. He was negotiating the price of my silence. He still thought this was a transaction. "No," I said. Vivian, be reasonable," he snapped, the old impatience flaring up. "You won the battle last night. Congratulations. You embarrassed me. But you don't have the resources to win the war. Do you really want to drag this through the courts? It will take years. You will be broke again in a month." "I won't be broke," I said calmly, "because Grant is freezing the accounts today, and I am not interested in a stipend. Dad, I am interested in justice. You don't get to buy your way out of the fact that you left your granddaughter to freeze." I did what I had to do to protect the estate. "No," I corrected him. "You did what you had to do to protect your ego, and that asset has just been liquidated." I stood up and walked away, leaving him alone with his coffee and his crumbling reality. That was the victory, not screaming, but simply refusing to be bought. Over the next 2 weeks, the dismantling of Franklin's empire was surgical and absolute. Grant did not sleep. He set up a command center in the library, surrounded by boxes of files. He filed an emergency petition to remove Franklin as the primary caretaker of the property due to breach of fiduciary duty. He froze the discretionary spending accounts. The black SUV that Peter had arrived in was repossessed. The catering staff for the canceled party sent invoices that Marla had to pay out of her personal jewelry fund because the trust cards were declined. But the biggest domino to fall was Peter. He was called into a deposition in a conference room in downtown Milwaukee. Mr. Sterling, the forensic accountant, sat on one side. Grant sat on the other. Peter sat in the middle, looking like a man who had shrunk 3 sizes, under oath, and facing the threat of federal charges for wire fraud. Peter broke. He didn't just confess. He vomited the truth. It wasn't just about the credit cards, Peter admitted, his voice shaking. Franklin introduced me to the partners at Obsidian Capstone. They needed to move liquidity out of their construction division before they defaulted on the Larkwell project. They needed a loss to write off, so they used me. They had me open accounts, run up debts, and then lose the money in bad investments that were actually shell companies owned by them. I sat in the corner of the room. Listening to him, it all clicked. The reason Larkwell went bankrupt wasn't just market forces. It was a bust-out scheme orchestrated by the same men my father drank scotch with. Peter had been the mule. He had destroyed my marriage and my career to help my father's friends launder their liabilities. "I didn't know they would come after you," Peter whispered, looking at me. "I thought you would just move back in with your dad." "You thought wrong," I said. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. I just felt a profound, cold pity. He was a weak man who had sold his family for a seat at a table where he was on the menu. While the legal storm raged, the ice in my own life began to thaw. 3 days after the party, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the State Workforce Commission. Claim approved. Payment issued, $4,800. The hold on my unemployment had been lifted. The anonymous tip had been flagged as malicious interference after Grant sent a letter to the labor board. When the money hit my account, I sat on the edge of the bed and cried. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. It was the first breath of air after being underwater for months. 2 days later, I got an email. It wasn't from a recruiter. It was from Sarah, an old colleague from Larkwell who had started her own boutique design firm, Redwood and Briar Concepts. "Vivian, I heard what happened. I heard you are back in the game. I have a messy project, a historic renovation that needs someone who can handle permit nightmares and difficult contractors. I can't pay a corporate salary yet, but I can offer a percentage of the project fee and flexible hours. I need a closer. Are you in?" I went to the interview in the suit Eleanor had bought me. The office was small, dusty, and smelled of sawdust and ambition. It was perfect. I took the job on the spot. Maya was healing too. The darkness that had settled over her in the car began to lift. She had a desk. She had a lamp. She had Wi-Fi that didn't require sitting in a laundromat. She sat for her SATs the following Saturday, and she walked out of the testing center with her shoulders back. She asked the manager at the bakery for a letter of recommendation for her college applications. She didn't ask him to hide the fact that she was a service worker. She asked him to highlight it. He wrote, "Maya Ortiz possesses a work ethic that cannot be taught. She maintained a 4.0 GPA while working 20 hours a week during a period of extreme personal housing instability. She is the strongest person I have ever employed." That letter meant more than any donation Franklin could have made to a university endowment. The most surprising shift, however, came from Brielle. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the back patio, staring at the frozen lake. She wasn't wearing makeup. She was wearing a hoodie and jeans. She looked like a child again. "He never went to the funeral. Did he?" she asked without turning around. I sat down next to her. "No, he went to your flute competition." Brielle flinched. "I didn't even place in that competition. I played terrible. He told me I was great, but I knew I sucked." She turned to look at me. Her eyes were red. "I'm sorry. Vivian, I saw your message, the one Maya sent. I was just scared. Mom told me that if I replied, you would ask for money and never stop. She said you were like a black hole." "Do I look like a black hole?" I asked gently. "No," she said. "You look like someone who is tired of being lied to." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this, in Dad's desk, in the bottom drawer, under a false bottom." She handed it to me. It was an envelope. On the front, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere, was written for Vivian. It was from my mother, Elena. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph and a letter. The photo showed my mother and Eleanor sitting on this very patio, 30 years ago, laughing over cups of tea. They looked like conspirators. They looked like friends. The letter was short. "My dearest Vivian, If you are reading this, then Franklin has finally done something decent and given it to you, or you found it yourself. Know that I am leaving this house not because I am weak, but because I refuse to be made hard by people who are soft. Do not let them change you. Your grandmother loves you. She is trapped in her own way. But she loves you. Keep your heart open, even when they try to close it. I looked up at the house. Franklin had hidden this. He had hidden the evidence that his mother and his ex-wife were allies. He had wanted me to believe I was alone, unconnected, an orphan in my own history. Thank you, I said to Brielle. I'm moving out, Brielle said quietly. I'm going to stay with a friend in the city. I need to get a job, a real one. I can't live in this museum anymore. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were years of silence to bridge. But it was a start. The final act happened a week later. Eleanor summoned everyone to the library: Franklin, Marla, Grant, myself, and Maya. Peter was not invited. He was busy dealing with his indictment. Franklin looked smaller. The bluster was gone. He sat on the edge of the sofa, looking at his mother with the wariness of a beaten dog. Marla stared out the window, refusing to make eye contact. I have made some changes to the trust, Eleanor announced. She sat in her leather wingback chair, the undisputed matriarch. Grant has drafted the amendment. Grant read the terms. They were brutal in their simplicity. Franklin Hale and Marla Hale are granted a revocable license to reside in the guest cottage on the property. Grant read, they are removed from the main residence effective immediately. The main residence will serve as the primary domicile for Vivian Ortiz and Maya Ortiz until such time as they choose to leave. Marla made a choking sound. But Franklin put a hand on her arm to silence her. He knew it was over. Furthermore, Grant continued, the discretionary spending allowance for Franklin Hale is capped at $3,000 per month. Any request for additional funds must be submitted in writing to the trustee. $3,000. That wouldn't even cover their country club dues. It was a poverty wage in their world. And finally, Eleanor said, taking over. The bulk of the liquid assets, recovered from the audit of Obsidian Capstone, will be placed into a new subtrust. She looked at Maya. It will be called the Elena Ortiz Educational Fund, Eleanor said. It is designated for the education and advancement of the women in this family. But there is a condition. She looked at me. This money is never to be used as a weapon, Eleanor said sternly. It is not to be used to buy silence. It is not to be used to force obedience. It is to be used to build independence. If any trustee uses this money to manipulate a beneficiary, the fund dissolves and goes to charity. Do you understand? I understand, I said. Franklin stood up. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to scream. I thought he was going to rage about his rights. But he just looked tired. You win, he said softly. No, Franklin, Eleanor said, picking up her tea. Nobody wins in a war against their own family. You just survived the defeat. The ending of my story isn't a parade. There were no balloons. We moved into the main house, but we kept the furniture simple. I went to work at Redwood and Briar every day, driving my beat-up Toyota until I saved enough to buy a used Honda. Maya got into the state university on her own merits. Though the Elena Fund paid for her books and her dorm, Franklin and Marla moved into the guest cottage. We see them sometimes, walking across the lawn. They look like ghosts of a different era. Marla stopped dyeing her hair. The gray is showing. Franklin stopped wearing tuxedos. They are small people now, living in the shadow of the truth. I don't feel a rush of joy when I see them. I don't feel the thrill of vengeance. I just feel relief. Revenge, I learned, isn't about setting the world on fire. It's about putting the fire out so you can finally sleep. It's about taking the keys back from the people who tried to lock you out of your own life. I walked out to the driveway last night. The snow was falling again, covering the world in white. I looked at the spot where I had parked my car that first night, desperate and freezing. Then I looked back at the house. The lights were on. Maya was studying in the kitchen, Eleanor was reading in the library. We were warm, we were safe, and for the first time in my life, we were home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's been a long journey from that parking lot to where I am now, and I appreciate you walking this road with me. I would love to know where you are listening from right now. Are you in your car, at work, or safe at home? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this video can reach more people who might need to be reminded that even when it's cold, the dawn is coming. Stay safe, everyone.